Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Xtreme Memories with Kris Kloss. Today, my guest, the one and only XPW alumni, one of the premier stars of Extreme Pro Wrestling. He is homeless Jimmy, the homeless guy. Call him what you want. Those are the two things he was called in XPW. We're going to get into that, but he is widely known as Homeless Jimmy. Jimmy, welcome to Extreme Memories.
Hey, thank you.
All right, well, it's good to have you. We had some hoops to jump through to get you on, but we finally got there, and Great to have you on the program. Jimmy, you and I go back a long time, my friend. You and I go back, back in time, and you know, we're going to talk a lot about that, and but let's jump right into it, sir. Tell us a little bit about, before we get into XPW, because this is Extreme Memories. This is everything XPW. Of course, we're going to kind of scurry around things of that nature of, like, let's say, when you broke in to professional wrestling, Jimmy. Can you please elaborate a little bit on that for the fans out there?
Well, I started in early '95 when I got back from Israel. I had moved there when I was young and lived there for 12 and a half years. And then I came back in early '95 and I got into training right away at Slammer's wrestling gym. Mm-hmm. And it was history from there, you know. December '95, paperwork was sent somewhere, and they officiated or made it official at what is it called? Wrestling Almanac and Book of Facts.
Oh, wow.
And in that book, it shows my date of December '95, my professional debut. So I stuck with it, you know.
Yeah,
if Pro Wrestling Illustrated could put that out there, that I was, you know, my professional debut was December '95, then hey, that's when I started.
Wow, we're talking, what, 25 years?
25 years, yep.
25 years, wow, that's
December will be 25 years in 2020. Imagine that.
That's impressive, man. That's hard to believe, but very impressive. So now talk a little bit about, because we talked about Slammer's Wrestling Gym a lot on this show, because a lot of XPW local guys, homegrown talent, the roots of XPW was a lot of those guys came out of Slammers, myself included, as just a ring announcer. Wasn't doing any play-by-play or anything like that, but talk a little bit about that, because and of course your training specifically.
Right. Well, my training was under legendary Dynamite D, and in fact, he was sort of my cousin. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really adopted into his family, but his uncle took care of me when I was very young. And real quick story about that is when I came back from Israel, I went to go see my dad. And he was like, hey, you know, what do you want to do now that you're back? And I was like, well, I got to get a job. And he said, yeah, I know all that, silly. He says, what's your hobbies? What's your ambitions? And I said, well, I'd like to find a wrestling school. And he was like, wrestling? What made you say that? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to since I was knee high to a grasshopper, you know. And he was like, well, do you remember my nephew, Darren? He teaches wrestling in Sun Valley. I was like, really? I was like, well, he says, go check him out. I think he has a show on Saturday. So I headed out there. Sure enough, they had a show Saturday, and got there early enough to introduce myself or reintroduce myself to Dynamite D. And they did the show, and I waited after the show, and he came up to me and he goes, so how'd you like it? I said, I loved it. He said, when do you want to start? I said, yesterday. and it started from there. You know, the next week I was in class, you know, training with legendary people like Ed Ferreira, who was at there was Dan the Man or Jesus Zapata that we used to know, or Felony from XPW was there. White Trash Johnny Webb started there. He started a little bit after I did. But there was Carlito, which was Carlos. He was Hombre de Oro over there. He was one of the trainers. And yeah, that's where it started. Vern Langdon was the owner of the place. Real nice guy, but you know, headstrong. He had his ideas of what should happen, and you know, you need to learn wrestling first before you do the wrestling. You know, and there was a time where he got mad at a bunch of us because we were talking about, you know, different characters from the WWE and actually WWF at the time, and because they were still F at the time, and he was like, "Oh, you can't watch that crap. That's not real wrestling." I'm like, "Well, that's what we wanted to do, you know." But yeah, so my training started there in Slammers Wrestling School and started doing shows for them. And then there was a couple of small shows that I did. I think Cincinnati Red had somebody on his show, or a show out there in Simi Valley. I did shows out there.
Okay. And you before you became Homeless Jimmy, so a little bit after, well, in between that and XPW, so what happened was D kind of had a parting of ways with the head slammer, Vern Langdon.
Yeah.
And what was the DWO, the Dynamite World Order. Now, you touched on something very interesting. I don't want to leave this out, about the timing of the DWO, and which, of course, the NWO. You want to elaborate?
Right.
Like, which, yeah. So just really quick, though, before, just to let people know, what happened was there was a disagreement with Darren, Dynamite D, who was the trainer at Slammers, and him and Vern Langdon disagreed on some things. So Dynamite D broke out of Slammers Wrestling Gym and created the SCCW, Southern California Championship Wrestling, which became involved in myself again as the ring announcer. And you became involved in this, and you were, the character I remember was the Skull Crusher, and you came out with the skull on a stick, and it was
on a stick,
yeah, and it was this one of these like haunting kind of monster gimmick, far cry from what you became at XPW with Homeless Jimmy. Now touch on a little bit of that SECW time, the Skull Crusher, and the other characters you were. Also, of course, like you mentioned to me, which I didn't know until you told me, which was the timing of the DWO, which is very interesting.
Right. Well, the whole story, I guess, was, you know, the disagreement started with Dynamite D and Vern. And I had already gone, you know, I had already left the school because I was already finished with my training, so to speak. And Vern was like, well, if you want to stick around here, it's my way or the highway. So I had already taken the highway. I started working, you know, independently other places. Not very much, but, you know, I think I did 1 or 2 shows here and there. And then Dynamite D called me up one day and he said, hey, I'm starting my own Fed. Do you want to join? I said, hell yeah, of course. And he says, well, we're also going to be doing an invasion on Slammers because that's my ring. And most of the guys that are there are my students. So I'm going to go and claim what's mine. You know, I'm going to give Vern an ultimatum. You know, so I was like, sure, of course, I'm game for that. So we went down there, and I don't remember exactly the date of it, but I recall, you know, always, you know, being, you know, aware of oh yeah, the big names, you know, WCW and WWE always watch what you're doing and stuff, right? So here we are, we're doing an invasion on Slammers, and Dynamite D decided to come up with a gimmick called Dynamite Wrestling Order or World Order. I don't remember which one it was, but it was Dynamite or DWO. And so we all wore shirts, and then with the DWO logo on it, and then we had our regular shirts over it. And a bunch of us guys that, you know, jump ship with Dynamite D were sitting in the audience in different spots around, and, you know, and so Dynamite D went out there during the intermission and he started to talk, and Vern got in the ring and told him, "You're done here." And he was like, "You know, I don't need a mic. I could do whatever I want," you know, and he continued talking to the fans. And Vern Langdon started to get him in the corner. And at that point, we all jumped out of the crowd and into the ring. And we basically got, you know, in between him and Dynamite D. And that's when he just raised up his hands and he rolled out of the ring and he left. And that was pretty much the end of Slammers. Vern Langdon closed ship after that, shortly after that, because he didn't really have a leg to stand on anyways. So we did a hostile takeover for real, took over the company basically and changed it to the SCCW, you know, and that was it. And then shortly after that, like really a week or a couple weeks later, we're watching TV, me and a buddy of mine, Tone Rodriguez. We were watching TV, and sure enough, NWO comes out, you know, and we're like, wait a minute, NWO, that sounds kind of familiar, you know, and they're taking a hostile takeover over WCW, you know. So we thought that was pretty funny how that came about.
That's amazing, man, because I think we talked about too how, so I wasn't there during, I guess at that time, but I remember hearing about it for whatever reason, because they had a couple different announcers there. But what was crazy was you were one of maybe the only one that was at that Invasion ringside and at Heatwave Invasion ringside. You're the only one. We'll get into Heatwave in a little bit, but interesting, Jimmy, because I never really heard that story. I heard the rumblings throughout the years of, oh, there was a run-in, but I think this might be the first time I'm hearing that story, unless I forgot, but this is the first time I'm hearing that story in that great length of detail. So I appreciate that. So now SCCW, we're rolling along together, all of us in SCCW. We have shows at UCLA, Yokozuna, Honky Tonk Man, we're involved in that. And then we have shows all over SoCal. Orange, I remember it was Fountain Valley. So we're going all the way down to Orange County. We're doing stuff all around. And just keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that this was at a time when independent wrestling was almost unheard of back in these times. Like if there was a pro wrestling show at a high school gym, Boys and Girls Club, this was an oddity. So if you were a fan and you happened to find out about it, which was hard to do, we had the flyer, we didn't have the promotional machine that WWF, WCW had, but we would get and when people found out about it, what, pro wrestling, WWF style pro wrestling? So it was very interesting, right? And this was in an era where kayfabe was at its height. It hadn't been gone yet, right? So that made those shows to me that much more cooler and intriguing and just off the wall fun, you know. But so we were doing shows then. Now, quick history lesson. We touched on this in some other episodes of Xtreme Memories, which is the fact that we would flyer for SCCW, myself, all you wrestlers, everybody. We'd go flyer, of course, all sorts of events, but of course, wrestling events, WWE when they come to town, WCW. Now, my first fellow Vapor on the show, thank you, Jimmy. The first fellow Vapor, George Hermosa, is very excited. But nonetheless, we would flyer, and we flyered the Arrowhead Pond where WWF came, right? So Rob Black, who was there as a fan, he got one of our flyers, and he was running Xtreme Associates Adult Film Company, which again, boys and girls, if you ran a company like that during that time, you were making money, and he had money. And so he was a wrestling fan, and he wanted to get something going because he was actually working with Paul Heyman for a brief stint at the time, supplying him with girls, with porn girls like Jasmine St. Clair and other names that were being supplied. So Rob and Paul Heyman had a working relationship. But then, of course, years later, it came out, we were all kayfabe to the fact that WWE was heavily involved in this so-called renegade ECW that was independent. Well, wait a minute. They were being supplied heavily by Big Brother, but they needed to kayfabe that so the fans would think they were watching this alternative renegade, you know, we're doing this all by ourselves company, but they really weren't. And so, and then they had a deal with TNN coming up a little bit later on, which Raw ended up getting on a couple years later when the XFL came in. That's a whole different story, but you can link that up, right? The TNN ended up having Raw, but they first had ECW. All right. So there's another link up right there to show you that WWE is connected. So anyway, with the combination of Raw, Paul Heyman, ECW getting on TNN, a regular network, and now that what we know about WWE, Rob was just not welcome there anymore. And Rob took exception to that. So he, screw this, I'm gonna start my own company. He got our flyer for SECW at the Arrowhead Pond, and the rest was history. Basically, SCCW in many ways became XPW, right? Yeah. So you had guys like Patrick Hernandez, your cousin Dynamite D, the Great, and of course Kevin Kleinrock. Those were the three kind of running everything. Yeah, those were the three guys that were basically for all intents and purposes running the show, and they're the three that kind of merged with Rob Black and Tom Byron, and the rest is history. XPW was formed from the leftovers, not the ashes, because SECW never burnt to the ground, but from the foundation of SECW. So Jimmy, now you and I got kept on board. A few other guys got kept on board. About half the roster was gone though. Like when we had that first few meetings, I don't know if you remember, but we would have the first few meetings, you know, all of us were there and maybe 10, 15, 20 other guys. And we didn't really know Rob yet. And Rob would just kind of walk through the office, and just a week later, half the guys were gone because he'd overhear conversations of guys putting themselves over too much, and he got rid of them. And luckily, you and I, he didn't see that in us. He saw people worth keeping around, and so I'm thankful for that. And we were kept on board. So now you're kept on board, Jimmy. You came in, you were the Skull Crusher, you were a few other gimmicks and angles that you had. But then all of a sudden XPW starts up. What was the genesis? How did it all begin for Homeless Jimmy, or Jimmy the Homeless Guy?
Right. So one day when we were there at the office and they had the ring set up and we were all in there, you know, doing our own things, pairing up and doing little, you know, rehearsal stuff. Rob Black was walking around and he was looking at everybody like he was doing, you know, picking out and his favorites and stuff. And he kept on looking at me and then going back to different people. And then finally he was standing there one day and he was like, what are we going to do with this guy? You know, what could we give him? Look at him. He's short, fat, you know, got long hair, you know. And they were like, you know, they were trying to figure out what to do. And White Trash Johnny Webb turns and says, well, isn't he kind of like a bum? He sleeps on people's couches, you know, and goes from here to there. And, you know, he's basically like homeless. And Rob Black's eyes got all big and he looks at him and he goes, yeah, we're going to call him Jimmy the Homeless Guy. And that's what they decided, you know, and the whole character, I basically developed the whole character myself. You know, they gave me the idea and I went with it, you know. But the name pretty much came from White Trash Johnny Webb and Rob Black, you know. They're like, you know, the idea was Webb's and the name was Rob, except Homeless Jimmy actually came about by the fans. You know, the fans were chanting Homeless Jimmy when they were actually labeling me as Jimmy the homeless guy. So I have the name Homeless Jimmy from the fans, not from Rob Black and White Trash Johnny Webb. You know, thanks to them, they got the creative part to start it, but I blew up from there. You know, going with the name and doing what I did. So
that's great, man. And it's cool that I always love stories. I always love stories that kind of like we were talking with Leroy RCG, like where the fans
right.
kind of dictate what's going to happen, and you can't fight that, and you wouldn't want to fight that. That's always an indication that you're just over, period.
Right.
And you're already over before you even done anything almost. So you obviously have that it factor where you definitely have that look that they love, and
right.
the persona you would come out, and you were believable. You were very believable in that character. I mean, I remember one time, I think we talked a little bit about this too. I don't know if you remember this because I didn't talk to you afterward when we first brought up, but you were in a match where you were beat the hell up, as you always were. You took a lot of bumps, and that was part of your gimmick, though. That was part of your gimmick of like, he's 0-15, or like you haven't won yet you're still out there, and you're still a fan favorite, right? So so you were the underdog, you know, and the fans loved that, dude. And I mean, what homeless guy isn't an underdog, you know?
Exactly.
So, but anyway,
that was perfect.
I remember one match, it was a death match, and we were all in the back watching, and you, to the point where it was like you were maimed, but you made it look good, right? And we made believers out of us. And I remember when you came back and you're bloody, and I was like waiting for you to come through the curtain. I'm like, dude, are you all right, man? Are you all right? And you're stumbling, and you just kind of nudged me with your elbow. You're like, yeah, dude, I'm fine. Shh, just be quiet, dude, you know, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'm like, and then I was awesome, you know. Yeah, so I can't remember what show that. Maybe it was.
You got to play the part all the way through, even when you walk through that curtain, you know, on both sides, you know.
Yeah.
If you get a persona and you capture that moment and you feel like that person, like I'm James or whatever people want to call me, asshole right now, but when you go through that curtain, you become that person, and it should take you a minute or two to get out of that character. You know what I mean? Because you should become that character. You should become who you are. You know, because it's entertainment. You know, it's not just, I'm not just going out there. I don't understand. You know, when like UFC, they go out there and they're bashing each other, beating themselves senseless with martial arts and stuff. You know. But it's still a form of entertainment, but because they come out and they're showboating their muscles, they're wearing different outfits, you know what I mean? So, you know, in a sense, that's entertainment too, you know. And I was on a show actually for ICP, and they had a couple of guys there doing a MMA, you know, exhibition, if you will. And I heard their trainer tell them, hey, they're paying so much money for so much time. Make sure you don't go, you know, don't beat each other like right away. You know what I mean? Go light and then, you know, build it up. And it's like, wait a minute, are you in the UFC or you know, mixed martial arts? I thought this was real. But yet you're telling the guy to, you know, no, don't knock them out right away, you know what I mean, or whatever. You know, let the match carry on until at least the second round. You know, it's like, okay, you know, it's all entertainment. So, and that's the thing is, any sports today is like that. Otherwise, it would be boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's amazing how much other sports and entertainment take from pro wrestling, but we'll never admit it. You know, whether it's production aspect, how the shows run, and like an aspect that you just brought up. I mean, you can take the blue in politics. and everything. You know, you can take the blueprint of pro wrestling really and apply it anywhere, and it operates well, you know, and you can do that in so many facets of life. So you're now Homeless Jimmy. Now your character at this point, Jimmy, you don't say a word. So there's promos, wrestlers do promos, and part of your gimmick is that you never talked.
Right.
You never said a word. You would twitch, you would do certain things. And speaking of breaking character, I mean, there were times where like wrestlers would like kind of like test each other and look at each other and try to crack each other's character. And then some would. But I remember with you, like we would hang out, we would laugh and all this stuff. And I was always impressed by the fact that I know who you are in real reality, in real life. And knowing that, then watching you as Homeless Jimmy, it was like, wow, this guy can really turn it on. And it was a challenge. I remember to me at the time, like, oh, I can make him break, you know? And I remember I couldn't. I'd give you looks. I'd give you certain little things, you know, the fans wouldn't notice we're doing. And then I just look right at you, man. And you're just, you know, you wouldn't break. And you know, there are a few guys that are professionals, even pros, you know, they can break. And I believe the true professional is those that no matter what, they're committed. And that's what you were. You were committed to that character. It was 100% commitment. You either do it or you're 100% commitment or just might as well not be that character.
Well, I'll share a secret. And this is something, you know, I don't tell very many people because I don't really, you know, get into the whole how and what, but, you know, obviously I love you. So I'm going to give you the full Monty. When I was a youngster, I watched a great movie called Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone, the old arm wrestling deal, right? Big old foreign.
Yes, look at that.
So in the movie, they're asking him something. I don't remember exactly the dialogue of the movie, but he said, what I do is I put on the hat backwards and I become a different, you know, character. And that from there sparked something in my head, you know, because I mean, I've had acting kind of sort of in my family prior, you know, when I was youngster, I did commercials and stuff. So I was raised around the Hollywood business when I was a kid, when I was a real young kid. And then getting into wrestling, you know, you find out it's part of it is entertainment. So that helped me a lot, that part, watching that movie and remembering that, just putting that. So in my mind, that's what I do when I walk through the curtains. I'm who I am. I'm Homeless Jimmy, because that's who the fans expect to see you come out, you know, and show them. Wow.
No, yeah, you were, and I remember that. And I'm actually, now that you mentioned the commercial thing, I vaguely remember this now, that you were in commercials as a kid. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, you either brought a tape in, because there was no YouTube at this time, but I think I remember maybe I went to your and Dee's apartment, because I would hang out, because I was in Woodland Hills. You guys lived up in Chatsworth, and I remember we hang out sometimes and go to the little candy cat and all that. And I remember maybe it was there. You popped it in and you showed me something. I vaguely remember this now. Maybe it's on YouTube floating somewhere. Do you know if we could see Homeless?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
All right. Yeah. I now recall this now that you brought it up, man. Like I recall that. And that was, who would have thought, right? You know, if like wrestling fans at the time, like, what? That's Homeless Jimmy. That's kind of cool, you know? But, so let's go
No, I had pictures. I've lost all my shit throughout the years. I actually was a couple times homeless for real, but you know, yeah, my gimmick came back to haunt me, you know.
Oh,
but what was I saying? Oh yeah, I had pictures of when I was in commercials and stuff. So I probably showed that to you at one point.
Do you remember what product it was for?
Well, I did May Company, Tommy Toys, Maxwell House, McDonald's.
And this was, I worked for all of them. And we're talking like in the 80s, early mid 80s.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
Actually, let's see. I moved to Israel in '83.
Okay.
My mom took me back when I was 5, so it was somewhere between 5 and 9. I was doing that.
Okay, and you were. I'm 44.
I'm 47.
Okay, so that means you were 5 years old in like 70.
73.
78. You'd be 5.
Yeah, 77, 78.
So,
Yeah.
from 5 to 9. So if anyone finds a commercial out there from 1978 to 1982, 83,
Yeah.
whatever, then like, and you can spot little homeless Jimmy, please send it my way. I want to see that again. So
Yeah, that would be cool.
Maxwell House, or as you said, Maxwell.
I did a couple McDonald's commercials where we ran up to Ronald. He'd come out and go, hey kids, and we ran up to him and stuff.
So
I remember.
Yeah. So in May Company, you said.
May Company, yeah.
All right.
They're not even around anymore right now. It's Robinson May or something like that.
Yeah. So this is like you said, homeless Jimmy, and then bitter irony. You became homeless, living the gimmick type thing, haunt you, as in your words.
Right.
And
there's another ironic thing is Rob Black came up with that story of homeless Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
Remember where we did the video and I had a girlfriend and the whole story?
Yeah.
I was in the Army and I got hit with Ancient Orange. That's why I had the twitch. That was Rob Black's little story there. And but the funny thing is I was in the military too, so that was kind of.
I remember you were in the Israeli Army.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Awesome. So now that bitter irony of doing the gimmick and it becoming real, that had to be terrifying for you then when you were like, as a kid, you're in the Ronald McDonald commercial, you're running up to sweet, friendly Ronald, and then years later you got Pogo. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to be friendly.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah.
Childhood memories come back to haunt me. Yep.
I'm gonna get Ronald on your ass, Pogo. You better watch out, man.
Right.
But so let's see. So now, all right. So you are now the concept where the name came from. So you're and your whole gimmick. We're talking about that and how it's perceived, how it's laid out. The winless homeless Jimmy, again, the underdog story. So talk about some of your favorite. What would you list if you have, like, let's say a top 3, top 5, or 1? What would be your favorite matches? Or, and also some of your spots, because let's talk a little bit about the LA Sports Arena and one of the most famous spots ever, but also include like, what are some of your favorite matches, or if you have one single favorite match?
Well, I don't know. I guess my first win in XPW was one of my favorites, with the Cronus, late Cronus.
Awesome.
He was definitely one of my favorite matches. That and the LA Sports Arena was with him too. And, he was a great guy and great to work with. We clicked really well. As a matter of fact, there's a spot in, what was it? What is it? King of the Death match.
Okay.
Right? Can we edit that? No. I'm all fumbling here. I'm trying to think what all these names. I've done so many shows and so many, what do you call it? Anyways. Yeah, so XPW's Baptized in Blood 2, right? Where I win the match over Cronus. There's a spot in there, and this shows you how much connection we had. Was there's a spot in there where both of us were looking down, and we all both had long hair. So both flipped our head, and the hair went back at the same time, and it was like on cue. Wow. And
all right, fans, as you can see, Jimmy and myself had a little quick change here. Unfortunately, homeless Jimmy got kicked out of the, they found him in the rec center that he's in right now, and he had to come back a different day. So hopefully, you know, maintenance that's roaming around the facility, hopefully the crew out there is going to kind of, you know, turn a blind eye tonight, and you can sleep the whole night there, Jimmy. But where we left off, we were talking about, you know, of course, the origins and of your name, and now you're established. You're in XPW. You got a great gimmick. But of course, you know, this gimmick was derived and designed before even our first show, as we mentioned before. But now that we're getting into television, we're on TV, syndicated, of course, home videos. And I want to ask you now, we're also going into a very prominent place for people in Southern California, the Los Angeles Sports Arena. And you had some memorable moments in that facility. But talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about your favorite matches. And of course, your big spot I want to talk about at the LA Sports Arena, one of the greats.
Right. Well, that is actually my favorite place, because it was my favorite match that held there was versus Cronus. And that spot that you're talking about is me getting tossed off of the LA Sports Arena's loge section, which is right above where, you know, they come out, you know, usually the stars or, you know, monster trucks come out of that big area where it's covered. And, you know, me and Cronus ended up duking it out all the way up to bleachers. We were up there, and somebody said it was about 35 feet high, and we had a couple of tables that were set down there. You know, it was still pretty high. The tables looked like about that big.
Yeah.
You know, before you know it, there goes the Beal toss, and I go and do a swan dive head first through the tables.
That would be probably about as high or maybe higher than coming off of like the top of well, higher than coming off the top of a basketball backboard or the 24-second clock, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah, that was crazy, Jimmy. And I remember, what was it like to you just in general? I love to ask this question, but what was it like being at the LA Sports Arena growing up for most of your life in LA?
Well, I mean, that was great. It was a huge venue, biggest one that we had for XPW, I believe. And, you know, it wasn't as historical the one in Hollywood, but, you know, it was big. And first minute I walked out there, Rob Black was already standing there looking at the place. And I walked up to him, and he looks over and he goes, "What do you think, Jimmy?" And I said, "Fuck, that's great. You know, it's beautiful. I can't wait." You know, it was like, "So what are you gonna do tonight?" I said, "I don't know. You see that ledge over there, that area over there, up on the top?" He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "How about if I go off of that tonight?" Like, "Are you gonna do that for us?" I was like, "Yeah." That's it. Was already in the works.
Cool. And you definitely did that. Now that was used a couple times. We see that footage on the intro of XPW TV, but we never saw that match in its entirety. Yourself and John Cronus from the Sports Arena. Now, if you could, do you remember why exactly that was? I mean,
by Kevin. I've asked a few times why that was never aired. You know, it was a great match. It was the ending, almost like an end feud between me and Cronus before I beat him at King of the Ring. Or no, not King. I wasn't part of King of the Ring. King of the Death.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so no, that match was spectacular. Your spot was spectacular. Again, we never saw that match in its entirety. I guess something happened, but There's no reason why we shouldn't have seen that match in its entirety. But that spot was shown over and over from a couple different angles. There's an angle straight on, and then there was an angle from above that I don't think that angle from above truly captured how far of a fall that was. But the angle from the side captured it the best. But the angle from the side doesn't show the whole drop because it cuts off with the top of the heads of the fans.
Yeah, you could see it goes pretty far down. And I actually have a picture that a fan gave me, and it shows me hitting the top table with my arms and head just as I'm starting to tuck. I mean, I just hitting it with my arm and head. The table's bowed about like that, you know. And right there, down there was Patrick Hernandez. His face was wide open like that, and I'm crashing through. And it just, you know, between that picture and the footage that they show every so often, that's yeah. It was a memorable.
Oh man, one of the great moments. And then, do you think, like, when you look back and the story you just shared, when you like got into the sports arena, you know, looking around in awe, and then Rob saying, you know, what do you think? And when he asks you, like, what are you going to do for us? And you say something like that, you know, what you plan on doing. Do you think just in general, from the days of Slammers, from the days of SECW, do you think like now being in XPW on television and being in a venue like the sports arena, did that elevate your game a little bit, wanting to perform a little bit more on a higher level?
No, I was always a born entertainer. I mean, I was in front of the cameras when I was young doing commercials. And so, you know, it was almost second nature for me to be in front of a crowd. And the fact of the matter is, if it's 10 people or if it's 8,000, like in front at the Tokyo Dome, to me, it's the same performance in and out. I'll wrestle for 25 people and I'll wrestle for 1,000 people just the same way. I give it my all.
That's great. I love that answer. I mean, to me, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that question, because the reason I like your answer there is because you are somebody that is in this business because you love this business. You don't want the fame. You don't, you know, I mean, and if the fame comes, great, but that's not the, say that one more time.
I didn't want the fame, but the fame is good, you know, I mean.
Right. Right. It's like, I think Mr. Rogers said that once, because he became so famous, but he said, if you're going to do this for fame, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If it comes, great, but do what you want to do because you want to do it. And we saw a lot of that, especially during that time in professional wrestling, because that was a boom era, the attitude era kind of time, when it was like one of the golden eras in pro wrestling. So we saw a lot of newcomers come in and out, but after a while, getting to know certain people, we saw that, and I really just cleared my throat there, but we would kind of detect, you know, this guy doesn't care about pro wrestling. You know, he just wants to be on television or whatever, and it's a hip, cool thing at the moment. Right. But I felt like it helped me step my game up. But at the same time, I love your answer. Like, hey, I don't care if I'm in front of 8 people, or like you wrestled in the Tokyo Dome too, correct?
Yep.
And when was that, by the way? Yeah.
There was a little over 8,000 people in the crowd just when we started the show. So that was pretty pretty phenomenal seeing that. That was nerve-wracking, to say the least, you know. But again, like I said, once I go past the curtain, it's a different deal. You know, I'm homeless Jimmy.
Yeah, so. and we touched on that earlier on, before you got kicked out of the rec room. That I would try to kind of make you laugh sometimes, but I couldn't break you, you know. And but anyway, you know, that's very cool, because yourself, Supreme, Pogo the Clown, to name some of the XPW alumni, went over to Japan. XPW was big. It was over in Japan. And so if I'm leaving some guys out from XPW that went over to Japan, forgive me. But I do remember Pogo, yourself, Supreme, of course, going to Japan, representing XPW. And then there were times in Mexico where I would go down for shows and guys would represent XPW down there. So it was quite the phenomenon. Say that again, please.
In Mexico too.
You were in Mexico too, exactly. Let me back up on these guys a little bit, because you had a great feud with John Cronus. But now you are one of the homegrown stars in XPW from day one, right? And what did you think? What were your impressions when all these other big names started filing into XPW? New Jack, Sabu, Chris Candido, Shane Douglas, Abdul the Butcher, Terry Funk, the list goes on and on. Did you think this was like, okay, I might get put back in the bus, I might get lost in the shuffle a little bit here? Or did you look at it like a, well, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to work with some of these guys. Or was there a little bit of both, thinking that?
Well, you said it right. To me, it was an opportunity to see our company grow.
Right.
And that was what it's about. It was about the company. It shouldn't be about the individual. It should be about everybody as a whole. And bringing in stars like Sabu and Terry Funk and Abdullah the Butcher, you know, greats of our hardcore business. Because I mean, you know, obviously there's bigger names like Rock and stuff and Hulk Hogan that we never brought in, but we were a different type of wrestling. Right. And so that brought people like Terry Funk, Sabu, and the Butcher. You know, those people represented our hardcore deathmatch type of wrestling, you know, and they were the greats to us. And, you know, I was never, ever an envious person. I'm not envious. I don't look at people like, you know, Supreme was a champion and I never got the belt. You know, Messiah came after me and he got the championship, you know, kind of thing. I didn't look at it like that. I even lost for 2 years straight and I didn't look at, oh, why is everybody winning and I'm not? Yeah. The point was, I'm doing something that I love doing. I'm out there putting on a show. People are loving me and bigger than I thought I would ever be.
Right.
You know. So that's about, you know, I don't know. So I didn't look at them as like, oh, look at them, you know, I'm going to be put off to the side. Because I was already trying, you know, Rob already tried to do that. He couldn't.
True. You know? That's true. So, yeah, it probably, your character especially, it was only a benefit. And I thought the same thing. You know, I know there was, back in the day, there were not everybody, and maybe not most, but there were rumblings like, oh, when Shane Douglas did his promo, like, you know, I mean, I can't even name names if I wanted to because I just can't remember who it was, but I just remember those meetings that we would have in the office. And, you know, Rob would show that promo of Shane Douglas at the Palace and just like salivating over it. And a lot of us were too, because it just made us look so legitimate. But I can still remember rumblings like, well, what is this all about? This, that. But I think at that point, the writing was on the wall. Like, we're on television, we're going to get stars, and that's how the business works. Plus I was talking to Messiah about this too, how I really liked that when they did bring outside talent in, it wasn't just outside talent has their matches, the homegrown guys have their matches, and they don't intertwine. No, they meshed together, and they were used to put each other and themselves over and whatnot. So they were part of the company. I think that was so vital, so important, because you can use these names, yeah, and you can let the company shine now. You know, not exactly. These. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right, Jimmy. So let me ask you this.
We had it, and it just somehow fell apart. You know, greed and envy.
Yeah, that's an interesting segue here, because I want to ask your thoughts on, you know, everyone knows, you know, we were we were run by an adult film company, right? There was a lot of controversy with Rob Black, even the incident with involving him, and when the Messiah left XPW. Of course, we talked about that. But what were your thoughts about just the whole big picture of XPW, all the drama like that, the adult film, like what, and Rob Black himself, like what were your thoughts on all that behind the scenes?
Well, my take on Rob Black back in the day when we first met him was, I'm working for the devil's son-in-law right here, his porn was the dirtiest of the dirty, the hardcore porn, so, and then the first lesson, or the first time talking to us is, you're going to be going through, thumbtacks and glass and this and that, which, to me was like, all right, whatever. But I thought, this was something good that could explode no matter who's running it or whatever. It's not always about, again, it's not the individual, it's about everybody coming as a whole, doing the show. And unfortunately, to my dismay, that came out as wrong, because the one person that started it was the one person that ended it. Pretty.
Yeah. Now talk about why you didn't make it to the end of XPW, because you were gone out of the company before we went to the East Coast.
Well, it wasn't quite at the end. I think you guys lasted another year after both me and Sabu, I think, left at the same time with Josh Lazy.
Right.
And so I don't know the animosity that happened between them, but my case was I had several pro wrestlers come to me and tell me that Rob Black was feeding them extra money to hurt me. And I didn't understand why a person would sit there and tell me one thing and then, do another. Here he's telling me I'm one of his best commodities, his homegrown commodities, but then wants to pay people to take me out because why? He just didn't like me. He didn't like that I was getting the fame that some of his other guys that he liked didn't, and it wasn't my fault. I wasn't trying to compete with anybody. I was doing my job. Wrestling was a hobby to me, but it became a job when you work for somebody, and that's what it was. I was doing my job, and I wasn't trying to be over anybody. I didn't want to be on the top. I didn't care about any of that. And because I was up here, Rob wanted me down here. And so when I found out from reputable people that I trust or trusted, told me that, after the third strikes, you're out, and two of them were back to back. I don't want to name names because, two of them are still alive. John Cronus was the first one. He stood up to Rob and said, brother, that's not how we work the business. Because Rob said, you know what? I want you to take Jimmy's knees out tonight. And he was like, why? Jimmy's a cool guy. And he goes, yeah, but I don't like that fucker. Whatever Rob's response was to that was, I want him out. Cronus, being the man that he was, George was his name. I knew him personally. He lived with me for a while, right? This is before he did. He tells me, or he tells Rob, he says, listen, brother, we don't do that in the business. Rob said, well, if you don't, you'll never amount to anything. And, that's what, and then he comes and tells me that, and I was like, at first I was like, I didn't want to believe it, and I stuck around for a while after that, because I was pretty much right in the beginning of XPW when Cronus told me that, and he warned me. He said, watch out, we're working for this dude. He's bad news. But I stuck along with it because my cousin Dynamite D was there. People like Cronus were there. I got to meet a lot of other great people, you know, and it was a good time. It could have lasted forever. We would be still fucking be on TV today had it not because of greed and envy. And so that's basically the deal. You know, I decided after hearing from 2 other people after that, a year later, you know, that actually both of them hurt me, but not, you know, one did and one didn't, you know. Actually, you know, since I actually talked to New Jack, he was the last one to tell me that Rob paid him to hurt me because Rob knew I was leaving.
I mean,
New Jack gave me the okay because he ain't no punk ass. He ain't scared of Rob or any repercussions. And we all know who New Jack is in our business. And that man told me that he got paid that night to do something extra. And being the man he was and the man that I am, because he respected me. You know, I give all respect to everybody, even Rob Black. And this is what I got in return was, you know, paying people to hurt me. And thankfully, people like New Jack thought that Rob was just a punk and a dumbass, because why would you hurt somebody that's doing his best for you? You know, I had other opportunities to screwing this man over, you know, and I didn't. Yeah, here he is paying people to try and hurt me. So why would I stay in XPW? I don't care how big it would have been. It could have been better than fucking WWE, and I would not go and work for him.
Amazing.
Man that I am, I had years later, I met up with Rob Black in UEW, and I acted just as cordial because I don't know 100% from this man that, you know, I believe other people, but it never came from his mouth because he's a pussy, you know. And therefore, I didn't think he was worth beating the crap out of him, so he got away with it.
I remember, now that you shed some light on this, Jimmy, it all came back to me now, and I do remember this part of it.
And when I was approached by some lawyers about the case with the Messiah, I said, yeah, I do believe that the man probably is behind it. Do I know it for sure? I don't. But can I believe that he did? Sure, I'll testify to it. Because he's paying people to hurt me, why not?
You know, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like I said, I do, as you're talking, it came back to me, and I do remember that, Jimmy. And I remember you leaving. It was just so it didn't make any sense. You know, it didn't make any sense at all. And boy, I mean, I guess only Rob Black knows the answer to that. And
yeah.
but
if there's a God out there watching all of us idiots,
yeah.
Then yeah. But yeah, or the devil, maybe he's yeah, but good boy, you know. But
yeah, it's crazy, man. Like I mean, even aside from that, if that's true, like you said, you had reputable people that confessed to you, and but at the same time, regardless of like how dark that whole thing is,
yeah,
just from a business standpoint, it makes no sense, because we were getting you and other guys homegrown end up becoming just as over as these guys you're paying to come in. And then why wouldn't you enhance these? So just from a business standpoint, the darkness of this aside for a second, just from business, it doesn't make any sense. No. I mean, it would make sense to do the exact opposite of what you just said transpired. And so
that's why XPW folded, just like that.
Yeah, like at the end, it just felt.
I keep repeating myself, and the thing is, it's all greed and hatred and envy. Right. Envy is one of those things, and that's why I try not to be prideful, because if you're a prideful person, people tend to watch and see what you have, and they want it. They're envious, so they want to grab what you have, and that's the worst. That's where the business of wrestling is. It's a dog eat dog world.
Absolutely. And it's like the more you show your ego, the more that's attractive to the wrong people, you know? So, but yeah,
Therefore,
no, Jimmy, I remember.
I wasn't trying to reach for the stars when, you know, the moon was fine for me. I shot for the moon. If I hit the stars, that would have been a different situation. I reached the stars as far as I'm concerned because I wrestled in Mexico and I wrestled twice in Japan.
Right, and your name was synonymous.
In my lifetime, I would have not thought I have gotten the height that I am. I'm a current heavyweight champion. Yeah, it's for a small company, but guess what? That sucker is heavy, and anybody that looks at it with, you know, envious eyes because it's a great thing to have. You know, you have a belt, you're somebody, no matter what that belt is.
Completely, man, completely. And no, 100%. And, you know, Rob did give us the opportunity. Unfortunately, these situations did occur throughout. So it was just the Wild West we were in, man. It was just this, it was the Wild West, you know, being just not even at the shows, just being at the office, just everything was crazy. And it was.
We were in the office sometimes until what, 1, 2 in the morning, you know?
4
in the morning. Yeah, I can't even remember, you know, it's been years now, but we are at the end of 2020 and we're talking 2002 when I left. So there's a lot of time in between, my friend, to forget some of the shenanigans that we used to go through. You know, because if you weren't there, part of the family, then you're not part of the show. You know, so you got to be there day in and day out, especially when, like me and Webb and Jake Lawless and some other people that worked at the Dynamite D, I think, worked there at the place for a little bit. You know, I mean, everybody worked in XPW for a short while, but I was there from almost morning until nighttime, until the next morning, you know.
Me too. When we would do television, I remember some days once we're done, I'm driving home and the sun's coming up. I was like, oh boy, just another night at the office, man. But you know, you talked about D, your cousin. Share a little bit about Dynamite D, the late Dynamite D, and of course, Jimmy lost 2 others recently, not just Supreme, but Felony as well. And talk a little bit about these guys.
I don't know if you know, Tracy Smothers just passed away too.
Exactly, man. I just found out about that recently.
Look at the goosebumps. You see them? Goosebumps there.
Oh, he was incredible, man. And I mean, I'm not just talking about him in the ring, the psychology and all that. I'm talking about backstage. So gracious and just, I mean, took the time, even with me, like coming out, introducing the crowd, and he was the first guy to come out, and he was like going over all the psychology with me. I was like, thank you, man. Like, you don't save it for the opponent. You don't have to do that with me. He goes, no. You're the announcer, and I'm a bad guy, and you're the good guy. So we're going to do that. You know, it was just like, wow. And really special, you know, especially back then working, we were so much younger, fresh in the business, and this total legend is just treating us like he would any other legend he's working with, right? So it was, I still remember that, just him wanting to go over. We didn't have anything scripted out. It was just me in the beginning. I was going to get interrupted by him, but nope, he wanted to make it make sense and put myself over. And I thought that was, he didn't have to do that, you know? But yeah, you're right, man. Like, what did that,
that's where greatness shows, you know, when it's not all about you. You look over for the other person, you know?
Oh, yeah. So. Do you have any stories about Supreme?
About Supreme?
Memories.
You know, yeah, I do. Supreme was a good guy. You know, he was somebody that in a way I kind of looked up to once I got to know him better. And the story I'm going to share is really, you know, something that I hope his family sees. And you know, when we got to Japan, they stuck us in a hotel for the first weekend. We were there for 3 days, 3 or 4 days. I think they were picking us up on Monday and dropped us on a Friday. So we were like Friday afternoon in Japan, and the outskirts of Tokyo, mind you. We were in this little small town, so there was really nothing to do out there either, right? Up in the hills, you know. And I wanted to go exploring, and Supreme was like, "No, brother, I'm gonna, you know, I miss my wife and kid, and I'm gonna stick here for a little bit and talk to them before they go to bed." And I thought, you know, even the whole excitement about being in Japan and everything,
Right.
the first night, and all he could think about was talking to his wife and kid.
That's awesome, man. And you know, I'll vouch for that because Joe Pogo, he actually shared with me that exact same thing. I don't know if you were there with Pogo on that trip, but Pogo and Supreme, okay, because Pogo and Supreme.
No, Pogo ended up going because my mom had gotten sick, you know, and they asked me to stay another month or so with Supreme. And I had to back out of the deal. You know, I had to tell them I couldn't because I had to go back home and said, you know, whatever. And so shortly after that last pay-per-view, they flew me home, and that was the end of that deal with FMW.
Well, Pogo vouched for that, and he wasn't even there with you, and he told me off camera, he said the exact same thing about the phone thing. So that's pretty cool. You know, we took a lot of pride in XPW when you guys went over there, because we kind of lived vicariously through that, and really kind of took a lot of held that in high regard with you guys basically representing us internationally at that time. So that was very cool, man, that you were one of the guys to have been selected to do that.
Right.
You know, talking about your cousin D, it's been a long time since he's passed, but I mean, if there's anyone that can share something about D, it'd be you. You were the closest to him, and
yeah. Well, you know, he was my mentor, my trainer, and he was supposed to be my best man actually when I was going to get married. And that was, gosh, that was years ago. Because he's passed already 13. Yeah, it was about 13 years ago. He was supposed to be my best man, and he passed away a month before I was going to get married. And so, anyways, I got off subject there. Maybe we could cut the rambling out of that. But yeah, Dynamite D was very special to me because, again, he was my family. He was my cousin, and he was my trainer and then mentor. Helped me out in life. We were roommates for a while. You know, both in a 2-bedroom apartment. Then we also were with Jake Lawless in a 3-bedroom house. That was funny because the both of them were always immaculate. You know, you wouldn't think that Jake Lawless was, but he was immaculate. And the both of them kept that house looking like it was a set off of Three's Company. You know what I mean? And the funny thing is, here's a story to get off the subject, but it shared, you know, Dynamite D's part of the story. Rob Black actually used to pay us to use that house for some of his sets. And so a lot of the movies were done in either Jake's bedroom, his bed, and then in Dynamite D's bed, and then my bedroom, because I had action figures and I had some chameleons and I had a cage with scorpions. Rob said, no, we're not going to use that bedroom. It looks like a kid's room. So I got opted out of that. I didn't get splooge all over my bedroom. But yeah, we used to have good times there, and wrestling. I mean, I couldn't find a more knowledgeable person in the business than Dynamite D. Right. And I just talked to a good friend of ours that I've known for years. That was one of the original Slammers students with Dynamite D, and was beautiful Jack Stud. Just talked to him just recently,
Cool.
and he said something that I knew all along was Dynamite D was a master at psychology, and he had this thing on his talk show where you had your characters moves, and you had like sets of moves, and you'd tell him which sets of which moves, and he would critique it and tell you if your guy or the other guy wins. And so, I mean, just the psychology of it all, he would write that down and figure out which character is going to win out of what, by what their, like an elbow was 2 points, or a jab was 1 point, a clothesline is a 3-point thing, but if you use too many arm, are you working the arm, that, and you'd critique and let you know who won out of the 2 people that were doing that.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. I never
was just in his mind, people would call into his show and they would give him the 2 opponents would give him different scenarios, and he would let you know who won. It's like, who could think of that kind of thing? You know what I mean? Spur of the moment.
He had a mind for that, because I remember he would, just a little example of his mind was, remember how he would be with the Rubik's Cube? Oh yeah. Yeah. Whoop, like that. And and chess. I think he was a good chess player, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I want to say that.
Very, very smart, very talented. And here's a little tidbit, just so fans or people that are interested to know about that. Dynamite D's dad was one of the Standells.
Right. Yeah.
So Dirty Water, that plays for the Red Sox, every time they hear that, that's his song. That's his dad's song.
That's right.
Bum, 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 ba-na. You know that one? Dirty Water, yeah. And they were on the Munsters twice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
So
wow.
That's the story of Dynamite D outside of the wrestling. He was part of that.
He definitely had the entertainment in him and his family too. Well, that was great, and the Felony, of course, you knew Felony from back in the SCCW days.
Yep. I knew him as Dan the Man.
That's right. Dan the Man. Yeah. Well, it's thank you for sharing that, Jimmy, because I mean, unfortunately, the list continues. We lose too many of these guys too young. And even Tracy Smothers he had just turned 58 a month before he died. Like, to me, I just can't believe he was that young, because that means when we met him, he was in his mid to late 30s. And he seems such like a seasoned veteran at that point. But I look back and like, man, he was young when we met him. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's crazy. Now, let me talk a little bit about when XPW had its reunion show, Cold Day in Hell. So we were going to fast forward like 5 years after the company was defunct. You weren't there when it went under, but you were there at the reunion show. What did that mean to you? Because the fan support was off the chart that day.
Oh yeah, I mean the fans greeted me back home like it was like I never left, kind of thing, and it was just exciting. I loved it. I was hoping that it would go further, because the word was that it was going to maybe start up again, this time without Rob Black. Or if Rob Black came back, maybe he would just be a character, which that's fine. That's all he is anyways, but I was excited as the next person. And, I think they only had two shows or something.
Yeah.
So, kind of sad.
It was.
Had the right person with the right kind of money had that company, they could have made something.
Well, it was circumstantial at the time, because that was when the crash of 07, 08 occurred, and we held that show in early 08, and Big Vision Entertainment, who produced the Wrestling Society X, they produced the Ghost Hunters sci-fi show. I mean, they were a legit entertainment company, and they had a lot of legitimate people. Kevin Kleinrock was working there. Yeah. And so unfortunately, that with production of Big Vision Entertainment, you know, for all intents and purposes, it was going to continue in one form or the other, but then the whole company just took a big hit, you know, in 2008. So just the timing wasn't right. But nonetheless, you know, it was a great night for all of us, just to kind of like what we're doing here with Xtreme Memories. We're getting back in touch with everybody, you especially, man. And
right.
So, yeah, man. And so that's really what that night ended up being all about. And the fans too, like I said, that show sold out very quickly. And, you know, over 1,500 people, you know, like that. And then, so it was a nice night, and it was produced very well on DVD, because again, it was through a television distribution company. And so it was nice that we had that little bookend, you know, and then, and of course, like you said, Jimmy, you were over like Rover, as if it just left off from a day prior.
Right.
Before we wrap up, Jimmy, talk a little bit about your post-XPW career, what you've done, what you're doing now.
Well, like I said, I got to go one more time to Japan, which was exciting. I did probably one of my most dangerous stunts ever. I didn't, and it wasn't rehearsed or you know, something like, we didn't even talk about it. It was just done. It was at the spur of the moment. The one guy had a chainsaw. My head was near the chainsaw, and the Japanese guy took my head, one of the other guys, because it was a big battle royal, and went, ding. And I don't know if you guys could see this.
Oh.
We're right here.
Yeah, clear as day, dude.
And that was from a running chainsaw.
Oh my gosh, they didn't take the blade off?
Nope.
What?
Blades were not off. We're talking Japan, baby.
We're talking Japan. Unbelievable.
And the news rocketed all over Japan too about that. I'm surprised nobody heard about it here in America.
Yeah, I would have remembered hearing about that, man. It's just,
right.
You would think.
It looks like I've been caught again here, sir. I'll be out in a minute. You're on the camera here.
Homeless Jimmy. I know there's got to be an underpass nearby. Listen, Jimmy, It was great talking to you. I don't want you to get in trouble once again. I know that the police is out. I know the authorities are there, and you're going to get written up. And the last thing you want to do, well, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe if you spend the night in the slammer, you know, what is it? 3 hots and a cot. Hey, maybe there's a silver lining here. But homeless
I don't know
Jimmy,
if they give me my camera back.
No worries. Yeah, homeless Jimmy. That's going to do it for us, though. And we did come to the end right now, and I don't want you to get in trouble once again. You know,
it's always drama with me for some reason. Yes, sir. I'm leaving.
All right.
All right.
Homeless Jimmy.
All right.
Yeah, for all of us here at Xtreme Memories, we want to thank you for being on the show, and we will see you. You're welcome back anytime once you get a new rec room. I don't know. Homeless Jimmy, thank you very much. Fans, we will see you on the 15th and 30th of every month. Don't forget Xtreme Memories with Kris Kloss right here on the Wrestling Chatter channel. So long, Jimmy. Jimmy, be careful, please, please.
Thank you for watching Xtreme Memories, hosted by Kris Kloss. He's dropping new episodes every month on the 15th and 30th. You can be the first to tune in by subscribing to the Wrestling Chatter channel right here on YouTube. See you next time.